these different benefits that are being created, but also that they can realize multiple sustainability goals at once. And there's all this value, but then the question remains, well, but who's going to pay for all that value? And why are they going to pay for that value, right? In the end, you want someone to, put their money on the table. And that was really kind of the starting point of what we were doing. So then I'm going straight to the results. What we did is we did interviews in 6 European countries. I went to these countries, or some colleagues. We also at European level. And from this huge data set, we try to pull out what are the main challenges for financing urban nature-based solutions. Those are above the green arrow. And then related to that, what are kind of some of the strategies that we see emerging or that are being suggested or that are kind of, coming out of the data that we think are promising for realizing the finance for urban nature-based solutions. And I try to kind of cluster them a bit, which left is more on the cost side, right is more on the benefit side, and the middle is more on the coordination. So there's also, for those of you who read Dutch, there's a Dutch policy brief from the Sustainable Finance Lab, in which this is very nicely explained with examples, etc. Unfortunately, it hasn't been translated to English yet. Maybe that's something that still needs to be done at some point. But just very briefly, maintenance of NbS is a big issue. So there's costs at different moments, but the maintenance is very different from grey infrastructure. So that's something that actors are hesitant to take on board. Generally, lack of public funding. Also, if governments have to choose, they prefer to cut on green often than on things like social security, because this hits people much more directly. So this cost effectiveness of NbS is something that is being sold for, but you are required to then value multiple benefits. So on one benefit, often you can't get the business case to work out, and that is this coordination issue. If you look at more the institutional investors, you see a mismatch between the type of investments that are needed in urban NbS and the type of tickets, time horizon, risk profile that institutional investors want. Then on the right side, well, there's the business case becomes more difficult because urban space becomes more expensive, increasingly more expensive. So in a lot of cities in Europe, there's pressure on the space, which makes the business case more difficult. Also, the fact that there's even though we can show that there's value and there's benefits, there's often a lack of cash flows. And a lot of financiers are interested in getting cash flows out. And then there's this lack of evidence, which I think I'm going to leave for now because others will tackle this point. Then under the arrow, this is more the kind of the solution side. You see also by municipalities and real estate developers, if you integrate urban NbS into larger, bigger projects, it's much easier to finance them. So that's, you see also now new urban developments, straight away implement urban NbS as part of it, and that's easier than, trying to take it separately. We saw in some countries that there was urban biodiversity regulation being developed, like in the UK. In Spain, they were trying this as well, with less success. But there are kind of taxation, regulation type instruments that can help integrate and also realize finance for urban NbS. Then governance structures are important for bringing together different actors to allow the funding. Supervisory action, we see in the Netherlands, for example, central banks thinking about biodiversity risk. So this is another kind of way in. The link to climate change adaptation, I think I don't need to explain, including the knowledge tools. But then also we really found a lot of players in kind of the reinsurance sector that maybe this could actually be one of the missing links for upscaling urban NbS. So I'll say a little bit more about that later. Yeah, so this is just driving one of the points home about this coordination of these different benefits. So just look at the picture. Each actor makes this cost-benefit calculation, and it's not working. But if you kind of put these together, it's easier to work it out. And that's also how we looked at the second part of the research, which was really about, well, what business models are there? Now, we can talk a lot about whether business model is the right term, but I think you know what I mean. And I think, again, the question, we looked at about 54 cases, and we said, well, who paid for this NBS, and why did they pay for it? And we found kind of 8 main reasons for that. Okay, this is the illustration of the green roofs. I'm going to just skip this, just because... it's all, again, showing, I think I don't have to explain this to you, it's explaining how for green roofs this business case can be built up from different stakeholders with different benefits. Where also the insurance firm in the Netherlands is actually lowering costs of green roofs by helping grow the market. So they, I don't know, have you heard this case by Interpolis, what they do in the Netherlands? So they did, what they did is they said, well, we see an increasing damage on the roofs in the Netherlands. And what we think will help is if more roofs have a green roof on top of them, it will prevent it from getting damaged, because they're saying it's because of the ultraviolet light. So the green roof is basically like a protective shield for the ultraviolet light. And if we stimulate the market in the Netherlands for green roofs on these little Dutch roofs on sheds and kitchens, etc., we expect that our damage costs are going to go down. And they said, we're not going to actually pay for it, but what we're going to do is we're going to promote this market. So they did national ads on TV. They made a deal with a green roof provider to kind of offer green roofs at low costs. I actually have one of these green roofs, just trying things out myself. But it lowered the cost of green roofs, so it made it easier, more attractive. There was also a free roof scan to make sure, so they took away the uncertainty of can my roof carry a green roof. So it's a very interesting business development from an insurance business case mindset. And again, it's not going to pay for the whole green roof, but it can help to make the business case work. So these are some of the cases that we studied, and these are the models that we pulled out of that. So we kind of gave like some nice fancy names and logos and icons to the different reasons for why things were being paid for. And then the first one you'll like, this was on risk reduction. But then there's also like these green densification, urban development model, more a local driven model. Urban offsetting, where it's we're losing green in one space and we're making sure that that's creating green somewhere else, or sometimes even CO2 offsetting into green. A vacant space, so making just the costs very low of making something green because space is vacant. A health business model, an education perspective, much for very smaller NBS, and then also a green heritage model, so green as part of heritage in a city. And I'm going to not go through all of them, but I'll just pull out at least the risk reduction model for you. And if you want to read more about this, I have very nice information online on all this stuff. Very easy, so like these type of things, like, so there were actually 2 examples that I pulled out for the risk reduction model. So these were often actually the very bigger NBS that were being taken from a risk reduction perspective. So on the left, you see the Isar River in Munich, and after a big flood event, the municipality and different regional governments decided to kind of put funding together to kind of renature the river, give it more space, and really prevent another flooding event. As a side effect, it also became a very attractive recreational area in Munich. So this was very much risk reduction, but I saw no insurance sector involved here, right? So this is really about the risk reduction from the public sector, basically. On the right, it's a picture from the Nature Conservancy, who did a really interesting project in Cape Town. They do very interesting projects with insurers also in other places. This was actually not for insurers, but it was about reducing the risk of drought, so the other way around. And Cape Town has a lot of drought issues. They brought together a lot of different stakeholders to kind of reduce drought by clearing and taking better care of the whole riverbed. So not just in the city, but before it comes into the city. So this is also, it was basically also climate mitigation, but then from a drought perspective. Again, so here we didn't see an insurance sector involved. In the green densification model, this was also one which was partly risk-driven. So sometimes there were places in cities where the municipality said, well, we can't build there because it's too flood-prone. But then if you make the plan to, put in a lot of mitigation and a lot of green and water, etc., maybe then we can build there now. So these are some of they say, but then it's really driven by the business case of, new housing and also this mandate of new housing. So it's a bit different than the risk reduction model. And just to show the difference, there are also a lot of nature-based solutions that are much more kind of bottom-up. So these are not these big infrastructural projects, but these are kind of, square meter for butterfly in Edinburgh, or, adopted tree type of programs in Leipzig. So so maybe that's just to show that there's different ways in for, why you could pay for urban nature. So then finally, so these probably don't. What I also had was one student who wrote actually the winning master thesis of that year on what role can insurers play in urban nature-based solution for climate adaptation, mitigation purposes. So it was actually a subset of the interviews that we did on the finance sector, and he did some of the interviews with me and he analyzed this separately. So this is, I'm just going to present this one slide on this, where we kind of try to pull out, okay, so what is it, what are these roles that these insurers can take, or the insurance sector can take? And, the first thing you could say is, well, insurers have a lot of money, but that was actually not the one that seemed the easiest way in, right? The one that seemed the easiest way in is that insurers have a lot of expertise. So a lot about where do risks fall, how does a certain part of a city respond to, big rain, etc. This means that also this expertise can actually help understand what the impact can be of NBS. I had an interview with someone at the investment bank in Berlin who were actually thinking at the time about adjusting the green roof subsidy according to kind of the risk level of neighborhood for flooding, etc. So to really kind of be more fine-grained about this, and I think that's something where insurers can really play a role. But I don't think they're actually positioned as experts. So they're positioned as insurers paying out risk. So I think this positioning of this expertise at the time, you're right, this is a few years ago, maybe this has changed, was something that also came from our interviews. This could be much better done. Also, insurers can influence, so they can influence stakeholders. Some of the interviewees said, well, if municipalities who decide to develop a certain area in a city first come talk to us before they do that, then the insurance premium on this whole area is going to be so much lower if we can already tell them what they should think about in the development of this area. So we can tell them it should be partly green. So it's also about influencing other stakeholders in their decision making. Again, by measuring also and valuing and communicating risks. They can, of course, also invest directly into NBS, but I'm going to hold it there because mostly people say, yeah, but that's very complicated in terms of, the institutional investment is very separated from, our risk payout, etc. But maybe I don't know enough about this, but who knows, of course, there's two sides of the balance sheet that you're active at. Why not think about the connections between them? Especially if there's areas where you have a very big coverage, or if you can work in a group of insurers who together have a big coverage in a certain area. Then we saw insurers innovate, so developing new products to realize disaster risk reduction, NbS. So I think this Interpolis example is a case in point, but another nice Dutch example, that's my 15 minutes, so I'm rounding off. Another nice example is the blue label that Achmea developed in the Netherlands. So they kind of indeed we're kind of selling their knowledge on their on risk. So for my own house, I can check, what is my label for flooding, for rain, for heat, etc. Heat is bad. So offering risk management service, but also giving room to employees for NBS innovation. So what I saw at Interpolis is that there was actually this one person who I got to know quite well, who really, as a business developer, he got room to do this and to really think about it. So I think that's another way internally that as an insurance firm you can actually support this thinking on how to prevent through nature-based solutions. And then finally, as a partner. So I think this field is very much about co-financing, about partnering, about seeing how the business case works above a single stakeholder. So by working together. And that can be with very different type of stakeholders like the Nature Conservancy, but it can also be at an industry level. So this collective action, maybe the next speaker will talk a bit more about this, but this is also one of the constraints we often heard, but if I invest in NBS in an area, all my competitors will benefit, and why would I do that? So this collective action issue means that this collaboration becomes even more important. I think all I have is a slide which has like a link on this. I'm going to skip on resources. So I made 2 short videos about business models and a tool that we also developed to help stakeholders kind of puzzle together on what their benefits could be from NBS and how you could bring that together. And also from the Naturance project as a whole, we developed a MOOC on Coursera on urban nature in cities. There's a also a bit in on business models, but quite early work. Yeah, that's it.